Welcome back to the Inside Nebraska Recruiting Blitz podcast. I'm joined today by Rivals Southeast Regional Analyst Marshall Levenson. Marshall, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me on. We talk occasionally, but I'm glad to finally get on camera with you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've worked together in the past, a couple different places at this point,
Yep.
and it's good to be back together. And we're coming out of like a busy month. June was obviously busy for everybody. Coming off a busy stretch of just commitments across the country for you. Obviously, Nebraska's had a couple this month, but
Mm.
nothing compared to having to cover a region where commits are pretty much popping every single day. Kind of, how are
Yeah.
you managing it right now?
No, it's cool, man. Try to be good at my job and get things prepared ahead of time. So that helps. But just making the rounds, getting on the road quite a bit. We were at a few different events. Obviously, it was down in Jacksonville for our 5-star event, and then at IMG for the Under Armour Future 50. So those are pretty cool events. But yeah, the commitments they're popping. Pretty often right now. So just had two today with two live with Dalen McCutcheon and Taz Williams. So that was good to get out to those. But yeah, man. So this time of year, it gets busy, and I like being busy. So it's a fun time right now.
For sure. Busy season indeed. Kind of speaking of commitments, we'll jump right into it. Nebraska picked up a weekend commitment from Bryson Webber, cornerback out of Fort Bend Ridgepoint,
Yep.
6'3" corner. Kind of an interesting one, kind of going into the month of June and even going into the month of July specifically. Nebraska felt like the school far and away to beat. Then Evan Cooper left, and that made things a little interesting.
Yeah.
The Cooper news kind of caught him off guard, obviously everybody off guard. But with Weber specifically, compared to a lot of guys the staff has recruited where there's multiple members involved, for the most part in this recruitment, this was Cooper finding a guy early in the fall, telling him, "Hey, we believe in you. Even you just switched positions. We think you've got long-term upside here, and we want to offer you." And that was really before he'd put together a whole lot of game tape. Much less like showed anything at corner. That like it was
Yep.
just the belief from the staff. And so now, he's in the boat despite Cooper not being here, and that's primarily because of the whole staff. They kind of picked up the slack once Cooper left and just kind of let him know. He met a lot of the staff on his OV back in June, and so had some familiarity, but really hadn't built relationships like that. But this last week, the staff reached out, just let him know, hey, you're still a priority here. We still want you here. And then obviously Nebraska hired a new defensive backs coach in John Butler on Thursday.
Yep.
And one of the first things Butler did upon officially being announced was calling calling Weber and letting him know, hey man, you're still a priority. We're excited to coach you. And Weber, I kind of reached out to Weber and say, hey, what was your impression of Butler? And he kind of told me, he's like, hey, first off, he's a good guy, but also like I was just really impressed at the fact that despite he just getting the job, he's got a plan for me. He's got a plan for the whole room. Like he's just very thorough in kind of how he laid out what he wanted from Weber and kind of what he wanted from that room, that secondary moving forward.
Yep.
We've both kind of seen him in person, Bryson. 6'3" corner, like we've said, like really athletic, the track times jump off. He's 10.5 in the 100 meter, I think 20.9 in the 200 meter. I don't have the number right off the top of my head. But he's fast in both. Placed in state with Ridgepoint. Ridgepoint's one of the fastest teams in the country overall in track. And he plays with the team in the 4x100 and the 4x200, taking them all the way to state in both. Um, as a player, kind of what have you seen from him, just kind of in some of these offseason events, some of these 7-on-7 stuff, and kind of what do you think he's bringing to the table?
Yeah. And I'll say this too. He's probably gonna get it. Coming out of this commitment, gonna get a ranking here pretty soon. So we'll have something to look forward to with that. Biggest thing I look at, I mean, obviously the height and the length at 6'3". One, I think was he 195 or one,
195 now, yeah.
yeah. I don't know if that's a corner long term. We don't, I mean, maybe he puts on some more pounds or even if he grows an extra inch, who knows? But he certainly can play the corner position, but I think there's probably going to be some versatility there. But when you have a guy that's long and has that mass at this point already, you can kind of pencil him in a few different spots and, going into a physical conference, right? So, I mean, this is going to be a guy that, obviously with his length can play the pass, but he's not afraid to tackle either. So, I wouldn't be surprised to see him, getting involved in run defense in Nebraska and, being an early contributor in that regard. And, his skill set fits that. I haven't seen a ton of him in the 7-on-7 scene, but I mean, watching tape, you can see that the ball skills are there. He's instinctive when it comes to that, and he's gotten some interceptions and knocked down some passes. So, I mean, overall, really solid pickup for Nebraska, and you kind of laid it out. An impressive job to keep him kind of, keep Nebraska at the top by the rest of that staff after there was some turnover there. So, yeah, I mean, this is a quality addition. I mean, this seems like a guy that as Nebraska's trying to build, this is the kind of mold of a player that, anytime you can say you can have a 6'3" corner that's, almost 200 pounds and can actually run, that you're going to take that every day, all day. So, just from an athletic profile standpoint, it's an awesome get for them.
For sure. And he, you kind of you watch the tape, and I actually asked him about this too, but you watch the tape and you kind of see it's a lot of just athleticism making plays rather
Yeah.
than
Technique
instincts
and
or ability or
yeah.
like understanding of the position. Because again, it was his first year. He was a
Yeah.
wide receiver for the first 2 years of high school. Pretty much his whole life, he's mainly wide receiver.
Yeah.
Moved over, had no recruiting attention as a receiver. Moved over to DB, started to pick up some offers there. Kind of settling into that corner role. But like you said, there's some versatility there. I think like you said, as raw as he is, and the way the staff kind of develops and works with talent, they're going to move him around a couple different places. They'll play him at safety, they'll play him at corner in practice. And again, he does grow an inch or two, or they kind of realize, hey man, your instincts are kind of a little more natural in the box. Like maybe
Yeah.
try that. They did that with Roger Gradney this last cycle, another Texas kid that's like 6'4".
Yeah.
A guy that came in as a safety and is already in the linebacker room working. So they like to move guys around, and I think he's a guy that kind of fits what they like and what they're looking for in that secondary. He's the first true corner addition for Nebraska this cycle. I mean, again,
Yeah.
in terms of what Nebraska does, as much of a true corner as you can be. Um,
Right.
but the first true corner, probably the last. They missed out on Aiden Manitai, who committed to Cal on Friday over Nebraska. That was like the lone remaining DB target out there.
Yeah.
He's going to Cal, and so Nebraska's going to have to kind of potentially pivot another direction for another DB in this cycle. I think you're going to see them expand the board a little bit. They expanded it a little bit in June, but some of the offers they made just were guys that are either just committed or about to commit or
Yeah.
kind of in that weird limbo where they weren't even able to. They're trying to get these OVs out of the way, and Nebraska got in so late weren't able to get that in. So we're probably going to see some new names. I think you're going to see some new names pop up this summer going into the fall, if they
Yeah.
choose to add to that room. Um, but we'll see. And man, on that point, like real quick, I know we didn't really plan this, but like the calendar as a whole, I've done this for a couple of years now. The calendar as a whole has shifted so much. It's tough to get
Yeah.
involved with the 2025 this summer before their senior year. Like those guys are pretty much in decision mode already. You don't
Yeah.
have a whole lot of time to like get involved.
Yeah. I was going to kind of touch on that, and you segued that perfectly. Recruiting has become so much about, who not necessarily the first offer is in like best position, but that does happen. A lot of players will hold grudges against teams like, oh, well, they didn't offer me early. So like, well, I don't really want to go there. Like they didn't respect me or whatever the case may be. If it's guys that have offers from elsewhere. And I think sometimes schools are nervous, whether it's just an optics thing or whatever, from maybe reaching on someone or maybe what may be considered a reach from maybe guys that don't have offers at that point going into that process. Like, okay, well, why don't they have offers and why is, so and so offering them now? But I think because of the way the calendar works now, so many people are committing, in the spring and the summer. And we've seen this the last couple of years. There's going to be a lot of decommitments and a lot of flipping later this year that almost in itself resets entire boards. So in entire position boards, at least at a lot of schools. So for Nebraska that maybe doesn't have a ton of cornerbacks on the board, there might be, five guys that they had on the board 3 months ago that end up decommitting in, October, November, December, whatever, that they can circle back on. So just because people are off the board, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're out of the question. A few of them are, but yeah, there's for every position at every school, they're monitoring everything the entire year because now you have no clue what's going to happen. You also have no idea who's going to leave in the portal at any time right after the season's over. So sometimes it's difficult to even predict how many guys at a position you need to bring in. But yeah, the calendar has gotten pretty crazy. And yeah, I mean, we'll see later in the season what happens. But I'm sure it'll either be guys that come back onto the market that Nebraska can circle back on, or guys that maybe just emerge and have, late bloomers that they kind of, hey, we like what he's done. We like what, maybe had a growth spurt, whatever the case may be, guys that they can kind of find or, evaluate whether it's guys close to home or around the country. But I'm sure that those will both be in play for Nebraska as well as probably everyone in the country at a number of positions.
For sure. And I think Nebraska is one of those schools. There's a couple schools I think kind of, again, really depending on what they show in the fall,
Yeah.
are kind of in that position to potentially capitalize on some of those late decommitments or, some of those guys backing off commitments. I kind of wanted to ask you, obviously Southeast analyst making the rounds right now. You're talking to guys, and obviously Nebraska's working to get into Texas a little more. And are you seeing Nebraska kind of being picked up by these guys as hey, Nebraska is a school that's like, are you seeing it when you're talking to guys as that's a school that continually pops up, or what's the general feel of Nebraska's recruiting efforts in the South right now?
Yeah, I mean they're definitely notable. Because I mean Nebraska is making it a stressing that as a recruiting tactic, which is a smart one. Obviously, when you have Matt Rule's ties to the state as well as a number of people in on that staff, and a lot of people around the country now, because Texas is so big and this region is so big, a lot of people end up coming through at some point or another. Whether it was early on career or just coaching, relationships, they know people in the area, whatever it may be. So Nebraska is definitely talked about by recruits. And I mean, I hear it, at this point, maybe not a ton of 2025s right now, but there's definitely 26s that, Nebraska is in, big, major contention, at least in the early running for a lot of 26s. And then you can even throw some 27s in there as guys that, and I would say this, Nebraska, I feel like does a pretty good job of evaluating, pretty early and getting in early with guys. So yeah, I mean, when you ask guys, hey, who's standing out or where taking visits this spring, summer, fall, whatever, Nebraska, a lot of these for these younger guys right now, Nebraska is an often name you'll hear along with, some of the other usual suspects. But, Matt Rule and, the trend that he has the program seems right. But like you said, a lot of it will probably hinge on what happens this fall. And, that'll be interesting to see with Raiola, being the suspected guy, for the future, what a young guy can do in, an expanding Big Ten that's going to be, fascinating to watch how it plays out. So Nebraska is going to be under a microscope by a lot of kids. And if they do good, it'll bode well. But even if they start out slow or, have maybe not the season they think, I think Matt Rule has kind of implemented a culture that they're going to trend up. So I think prospects have resonated with that for the most part.
For sure. It feels very boom bust right now, especially looking ahead to
Yeah.
26 and 27 in terms of what the ceiling and floor is of potential classes down the road. Like, I think a lot like Nebraska's just in that weird position where you can't really look at last year because they didn't have sustainable quarterback play.
Yeah.
And that was year one of a coaching staff. And then you look at year two, like you just don't know. Like
Yeah.
hypothetically, like Dylan works out and lives up to the hype of the 5-star quarterback, top quarterback in the class, all of that. And, you've surrounded him with weapons and, the offense starts to go somewhere. You make a bowl game, all of a sudden, like things start to feel like they're turning around. But at the same
Yeah.
time, you start a little slow. You kind of don't have the season you hope for. All of a sudden, it's like, hey, we were in it for a guy like London Smith, out of Waco University.
Yeah.
Or we were in it for like Paris Melvin out of Cy Springs, like those type of guys. Like we were in it going into the season with
Yeah.
those guys. And this season really could affect like how well Nebraska stands with those guys coming out of it. London and Paris are two guys that I think already early on in 26 have popped up as two Texas guys Nebraska really likes. London has every offer in the country at this
Yeah.
point, or has every school in the country at least in pursuit or monitoring him. one of the more fascinating athletic profiles in that 26 class, plays a couple different sports.
Yeah, I
Um,
think Rivals has him the highest out of any of the networks too. I mean, he's a
he's a
top
top 50
50
guy.
recruit
Yeah.
for us. Yeah, I mean he's an awesome one. I mean, no, again, this isn't really a necessarily a major a good evaluation because yeah, if you watch him play, it's like yeah, no wonder Nebraska wants him so bad.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, and we can talk about some more of these 26s here in a little bit. But to kind of go back with, I think Nebraska can be one of those teams that maybe takes advantage of some late year movement and swoop in on some guys that maybe they weren't even in on before, maybe that weren't even looking at Nebraska. I mean, the whole Raiola recruitment. Now I know there's, family connections and obviously a lot of history to that recruitment, but I think Nebraska is a program that can capitalize on things like that to where, they maybe seem out of it, but then, all of a sudden they're in landing someone. And I think all it takes is just a couple of those guys to have things start falling the right way. But obviously, you need a strong fall to do that. So I think the fall is this season may actually impact the 26s more than, landing some more 25s, because if you finish off a season strong and have a good year, you can sell the future rather than just kind of what is right now. So I think for the 26s and 27s, the fall will be, massive for them.
For sure. And where you're at with 25, that this isn't just a Nebraska thing, it's an every program thing right now. Like
Yeah, yeah,
you're pretty much done with 25. Like there's a handful of guys every school's kind of waiting on.
yeah.
Obviously Nebraska has a couple spots open. Like, hypothetically, David Sanders commits somewhere else in August, and
Right.
then, come October is like, hey, I want to look around. Nebraska's not going to say no to that.
Right.
But there are, every school's a little picky right now with their spots in 25. So yeah, like you're saying, like I think 26 is going to be the 26's recruits are going to be more affected by this upcoming
Yeah.
season than 2025. Kind of touching on some of those 26's in the state. We touched on London. That's a guy that got his name early on as a wide receiver, but then you
Yeah.
watch his sophomore tape and the corner stuff is really good. And
Yeah.
he just kind of looks natural there. And you kind of see, kind of some potential long-term upside there. You talk to some schools that have been in it for a while and they're like, hey, we kind of see corner long-term with him now instead of wide receiver, which like,
Yeah.
you and I have had this discussion in the past too, but as a guy that's like 6 foot 6'1", you can be a very good wide receiver. You can be an elite corner with the way
Yeah.
he moves and the ball skills he's got.
Yeah. And I think, and then everyone wants the ball in their hands, right? That's everyone that's always been the case. They want to be the guy scoring touchdowns, but and we saw this in the Houston area, which I know we're talking about London here, but with Jacaden Ferguson, who he's like a really good example from the 25 class of a guy that had been playing wide receiver and had a recruitment going, but maybe had slowed down a little bit, not stalled out, but he still had schools coming after. But then he switched over to corner this offseason, and then boom, it was like LSU offer. But he's like he's committed to Kentucky. But anytime you see one of those guys that can play both, go with corner. Like you're gonna
Yeah.
be that much more loved and everything because there's a lot of wide receivers that are really good, but there's not nearly as many cornerbacks that. So if you can play that position, do it. And you look at London and you look at the pedigree, because what his dad was a safety for Baylor back in the day, I think. He also plays basketball. London does, and then his mom was really big in track. So this is a guy that, he has the pedigree to probably do anything on a football field or basketball court that he wants to do. So yeah, he's going to be a fascinating one to follow. But there's some other guys in this area that Nebraska's going after that I've seen recently, and you've seen a couple of them as well. But one that I look at for Nebraska early on, and this is a guy that blew up. He said kind of two blow ups is Brock. Um,
Boyd. Yeah.
So yeah, anyways, Brock Boyd, yeah, I love him as a player. I saw him in camp, this season, and kind of early on before he blew up again, seemed like the three for the long one was going to be like Nebraska, TCU, and SMU. That seemed like it was going to be, kind of a thing. But then, Ole Miss offered, Oregon offered. I think he picked up like 11 offers in 2 days.
Oh, it
During
was
camps.
insane. His June was nuts.
Yeah. So, and I saw him probably three times during June, which was really fun to see. So he's definitely one that I would be keyed in on. I know Nebraska is, if you're a fan of Nebraska, go watch him and pay attention to him because he's one that I could absolutely see ending up at Nebraska. They're going to be among that top group, and they already have been for a while. And again, they were one of the early entries, of his
That was an
20 and
early
21 offers.
that was an early identification by
Yeah. And
the
so
staff.
they definitely got that one right.
Are you aware of the family tie there, or the family ties got to Nebraska?
I know there's something. I don't know the details of it.
So he and Garrett McGuire is Nebraska's wide receivers coach,
Yeah.
Joey McGuire's son. So when Joey was the head
Yeah.
coach at Cedar
Okay.
Hill,
Gotcha.
Boyd's dad was the what coach on staff. And so those two families have pretty much grown up together. So for the longest
Yeah.
time, Brock kind of saw Garrett, who Garrett again is like only 23,
Yeah,
24,
he's
very
young.
young, very, very young. So he's seen Garrett kind of as his older brother figure his whole
Yeah.
life. And now, that's the guy that's recruiting him. And so,
Yeah.
Tech's obviously involved too because McGuire connection.
Sure.
But
And his brother now.
right, exactly. And so Texan there, like you said, SMU, TCU, and again, he got 11 offers last month. So this thing's really exploding. But
Yeah.
Nebraska's got staying power there just because of his relationship with Garrett, his trust in Garrett, and like he got offered last summer when he camped in front of Garrett, and the staff down at a satellite camp in Texas. He
Yeah.
went back out despite having the offer. He went back out this summer to that camp just to experience being coached by Garrett again,
Yeah.
which says a lot kind of about his faith in Garrett McGuire and kind of that relationship those two have. So yeah, like that's a big one I think in Texas. If you can circle a name in Texas to keep an eye on in 26, just one name, that's one. If
Yeah.
you circle a couple, like I said, London, Paris, another one, Nebraska's really been in on for a while now too. Jamarion Carlton out of Temple.
Yeah.
Is a guy that staff really loves. They found him at a camp last summer. Not really found him, it was a kid that's been on a lot of
Sure.
radars, but they offered
Yeah.
him after a camp last summer. And then he played in an AAU tournament up in Omaha this spring and
Yeah.
found his way down to Lincoln real quick for a camp. So that's another guy that I would keep an eye on over there. But those are two specifically I would say. Nebraska's been in those two recruitments for a while, and they have some staying power in both recruitments down the stretch.
Yeah. I'm not sure where Nebraska, fits exactly into this recruitment, but for Jordan Clay, and you were one that, you've texted me about Jordan Clay before. I think you saw him at some point. I've seen him a couple times now, but huge towering wide receiver. 6'3" or 6'4". I think he's at 200 pounds already. He's one that he can be a legit Big Ten receiver. I mean, that physical just monster wide receiver, awesome ball skills. He's the type of guy, I was talking a little bit ago, can be a big time weapon in a Big Ten offense. He's not going to be a guy that can get pushed around very easily. Texas is involved and he's got a bunch of offers now. I mean, I think he's a 15, 20 offer guy already, but Nebraska got in it May 15th or so. So I'll be interested to see how, where that goes. Wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets up for a visit. And I mean, he was, I think he was interacting with some stuff on social media with Nebraska and everything. So interested to see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, a few different wide receivers in Texas. And, you mentioned, Paris Melvin, who's on defense. So, yeah, I mean, there's a couple different positions that looks like they're going after in the 26 class. And, with this upcoming season, the 27 class, in my opinion, is just loaded. So there's probably going to be some 27 kids that, we see, Nebraska reaching out to or start offering here pretty soon. But, yeah, so I like Nebraska going after Texas kids, and I'm excited to kind of see how it plays out with, what they do this season and kind of who responds to, everything that Nebraska's doing in this region.
For sure. You talk with speaking Clay real quick. That was a guy that, we saw him at I think it was Under Armour Dallas or Houston, one of the Under Armour camps
Yeah.
we saw him at. And it's like, how does this kid not have more offers? Like that
Yeah.
felt like one of the best kept secrets in the
Yeah.
state.
He started blowing up. He got him.
Yeah, it came pretty quick, but yeah, that really really impressive talent. One of those outside ball like receivers you love to see, and yeah, no, that was a big one. Kind of, and he kind of mentioned to me Nebraska was one of the first schools that reached out. Last month, June
Yeah.
15th, was the first date they could start directly reaching out to 26s.
Yeah.
Clay was early on Nebraska's list to get to. So kind of tells you where they're at with him. But and that's a city they're trying to get a little more involved in.
Yeah.
Michael Terry, and they've been involved in some other recruitments in that San Antonio area. Where they're really starting to kind of make their living in is they spot recruit Houston,
Yeah.
like Shadow Creek's a program they've kind of established themselves as is like, hey, we're going to offer a couple kids here. We're going to be involved with a couple guys here.
Yeah.
They've tried their hand at North Shore. We'll see what happens there. Everyone wants to recruit North Shore.
Yeah.
You know that
Yeah.
as well as I do. But up in Dallas, man, they've really started to, because of Garrett McGuire's ties, because of some of the staff's ties, they're a little stronger in Dallas and specifically in South Dallas.
Yeah.
DeSoto, they're trying to build a pipeline there. Got Mario Buford,
Yep.
Marquez Buford. They're on a couple guys there right now. Lancaster with that new staff over there and kind of the loaded talent they've got coming up in
Yeah.
26 and 27. I think they've got 3 offers out to 27 kids at Lancaster already. Like
Yeah.
they're really early there. They're really trying to build something there. But yeah, I'm sure we'll have you on a lot more going into the
Yeah.
fall and going to the spring too, especially once the calendar kind of turns over to 26 and 27. Because yeah, I fully expect Nebraska to really recruit the state of Texas hard these next couple of cycles. But
Yeah.
that'll probably do it for us, for this week. Not a whole lot going on. Kind of we're in the dog days of summer as they
Yeah.
call them.
Yeah.
For Nebraska specifically, obviously you got a good bit going on, but for Nebraska specifically,
Yeah.
kind of we're out of commitment season. It was a busy rush, kind of end of June, early
Yeah.
July on commitments, and now I'll have it up on the site sometime this week, but kind of it's a big question now. Who's next to commit? It's we've had an idea of who's next for the last couple of weeks, even months, but now it's like, hey, there's a handful of guys left on the board, and the number
Yeah.
one target on the board is probably going to push it till the season. So
Yeah.
who's next, So that's pretty much where we're at. And last, I think the next big thing next weekend we will touch on. At the end of July, Nebraska's hosting, like a lot of schools. The end of July visit weekend is
Yep.
big
Yeah. That'll be
for a
big.
lot of programs. That one's going to be key for figuring out where some 2025s are leaning.
Yeah, I was
Because
gonna say a lot of guys that go to those
yeah,
July visits, those are often telling because they haven't been able to go anywhere in about a month, and then after that they won't be able to go anywhere for about a month. So if they fit in a visit on those, those 2 or 3 days that are open, that's often kind of telling of where, who's prioritizing who. So you can often read between the lines for a lot of those guys that are at places in July, for at least for the guys that are about to start their senior years.
for sure. For 25s especially. And 26s, it's an awesome opportunity to kind of get the
Oh yeah.
ball rolling there. Every school kind of takes that as an opportunity. I'm sure Nebraska's gonna have some in-state guys, some regional
Yeah.
guys, and there's a couple other national prospects that have already planned on or already stated they're going to be in town. We've already posted that over at Inside Nebraska. You can read that. Before we get out of here, feel free to like and subscribe to this video. Marshall, anything you want to plug before we get out of here?
You can follow me on Marshall Rivals on Twitter and Instagram, but other than that, I don't think so. I mean, just keep up with the obviously the with your content and your whole, the staff there, also the national analyst staff. There's a lot of good content coming out right now, a lot of different commitments for July, at least from the national standpoint. So, but I'll just kind of, I know we talked about this earlier, but I'll finish off with this. And with the way the recruiting calendar works, it's busy during the summer and then there's kind of a lull, and then mid-season to late season, the whole board's going to change. Like everything will shuffle, and classes will completely flip, and not necessarily flip away, but just flip in how they're perceived. And senior seasons change, a lot of opinions, rankings change. So yeah, yeah. No, I'm excited. I'm excited for this season. I'm also excited for NCAA 25 or college football 25 coming out
Oh
this
yeah. I'm
week.
sure
So
people listening to this will probably have that playing while, they're listening
yeah.
here. That's
No,
I'm
do that. So
assuming
that's
what
a good
most of
idea.
us
I'll
are
do that.
doing with our
Yeah.
weeks
Yeah. I will
at this
certainly
point.
be playing quite a bit.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Who's your first? I have a feeling I know what it's going to be, but who's your first dynasty going to be?
I think I got to do Oklahoma State,
Yeah, I
right? I mean, I
figured.
graduated from there, so I think I gotta go. Take Ollie Gordon, go win the Heisman, and move on from there. But I think me and my friends, I think we're doing one Power Four, so we all each get a Power Four, and then after we do that one, we'll start up a G5, and I think you got to do an FCS one. So I'm gonna find some be an interesting one to pick those out. But I think Oklahoma State's going to be the first one I go when I fire it up.
For sure. Yeah, we've talked about me and my friends. We're gonna do. We're not gonna. We're sticking. Or we're gonna lean away from the SEC and Big Ten, kind of make it a little more interesting.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do Big 12 first. I have no idea what my team's gonna be yet. I'm still deciding. Oklahoma State with Ollie Gordon's not a bad option at all for to
Yeah.
start. Man, you could just lean on Ollie pretty much, and you've got
Yeah.
good weapons. You've got solid defenders like that.
Yeah,
That's
and that
not bad
kind
at
of brings up
all.
that kind of brings up a an interesting point. The Big 12 this season, just in actual like on the actual field, is going to be really interesting because
Yeah.
obviously Texas and OU leave, but um yeah, I mean Colorado enters. Who are they going to be good? Are they going to be bad? Like
Right. Utah's
Oklahoma
in there.
State.
Like it's just yeah,
Yeah,
it's gonna get crazy. And that's I think the most wide open conference for me going into the year. Like, I just don't have a tell on.
yeah. So that'll be fun for on college football 25 to run that one.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, I'm sure I'm gonna get a Nebraska dynasty in there at some point.
Oh yeah.
I'm sure I'll get some of these some really fun ones. I'm gonna definitely gonna try a couple of G5s one. I think you get some creativity with the I don't know if you saw today, Kent State's got like 21 helmets
Yeah, I
in this
saw that. It's
game. Like
crazy.
I'm sure at some point I'll just have to try
Yeah,
my
I
hand
think you got to
there.
do one with Boise. You got to run it with the blue field at
Oh
least.
yeah.
Yeah, you got to do something. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it'll be cool. I'm sure we'll be in touch about that. But yeah,
for
it's
sure.
yeah, we're gonna be in a little bit of a lull from a recruiting and actual football standpoint, but then in about 6 weeks we're gonna be full
Yeah.
swing. So,
Perfect time to dive in on some dynasties. We're going to get in a couple of years
oh
here,
yeah,
these next few weeks.
yeah,
But Marshall, appreciate your time. Appreciate you joining the show. And yeah, man, we'll talk to you very soon.
awesome. Thanks, man.